Hello again. We're going to continue looking at the subject of 2 Chronicles 7:14. I'm just going to read it to you before we begin. God says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, will pray, will seek my face, will turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. So we've looked at the fact that we need to humble ourselves and also pray. What we're going to look at today is the fact that we need to seek His face. Now the big question is, what's the difference between praying and seeking God's face? Well, it's very simple really. When we come to God in prayer, very often we're coming because there's something that we need from God. We want something from Him. It could be healing, it could be all manner of things, but we want something from Him, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a greater intensity of prayer called seeking His face, where we're not coming to God because we need something from Him. We're coming to God because we need God. And that's exactly what Paul meant when he said, I want to know Him and the power of His resurrection. Paul was saying, I want God. King David says the same thing in the Psalms. He said, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you, O Lord. David is saying the same thing. I want you. This is what it means to seek the face of God. Not necessarily coming because we need something, but coming because we need God. That's why it says David was a man after God's own heart. And what happened on the Isle of Lewis was very much this thing. Yesterday we finished talking about a young man in a barn full of straw in the middle of winter at 3 o'clock in the morning. This group of people that had come together to seek God's face. He cried out to God and he said, Lord, am I fit to be in your presence? Are my hands clean? Is my heart clean? Am I right with you? And he fell into a trance along with some of the elders. And they left that place at 3 o'clock in the morning in November, terribly cold morning. And as they walked home, they saw people kneeling on the streets. Lights had come on the houses because God had broken out over the Isle of Lewis. And the reason why He broke out is because people were seeking Him. That's what it was. Well, it didn't stop there. Peggy, who we talked about yesterday, the old lady, she said to Mr. Mackay, you need to invite, there's a preacher that should be coming. She'd had a vision of a preacher coming. Mr. Mackay invited a man called Duncan Campbell. When he finally got to the Isle of Lewis, an elder met him and said, Mr. Campbell, I need to ask you before you set foot on the island, are you walking with God? And Mr. Campbell said, well, all I can tell you is I fear God. Well, Mr. Campbell was taken to the epicenter of this revival, which was Barvis, a village called Barvis. There were 300 people waiting for him at 9 o'clock at night. By the time he'd stopped preaching, which was 10:45, he thought that it was over. The people filed out. But a deacon in the church turned around to him and said, God hasn't even started yet. God hasn't broken through yet. And this deacon began to pray. And after a quarter of an hour, somebody from outside of the church said, Mr. Campbell, come out. You need to come and look. God has answered prayer. Hundreds of people had gathered outside of the church at 11 o'clock at night. There was a local dance going on that night. And for no apparent reason whatsoever, there was 100 young people at that dance. They left that dance hall, they got onto buses and they made their way to the church. People crowded in. The place was packed out. They were coming in and Duncan Campbell had to preach all over again. People were crying out to God. They wanted God. At 3 o'clock in the morning when this had finished, when Duncan Campbell went outside, he was told that there was a gathering of hundreds of people outside of the police station, the local police station, crying out to God. He walked a mile to these people just to see them. This was simply the first day of this massive, awesome revival. Why did it happen? Why did God come in such power? I'll tell you why. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. Yes, as Paul said, I want to know him and the power of his resurrection. As David says, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for him. This is the key to seeing God change this land. God bless you. See you tomorrow.